presentation is on the effects of hypoglycemia on the brain that I did for my general psychology course at Polk State College last semester. Hypoglycemia is a condition in relation to diabetes mellitus characterized by the insufficient levels of glucose in the blood. It is caused when there's an imbalance of the hormone insulin that is used to break down glucose so that the body can use that as energy for all of its functions. There are treatments for each individual instance of hypoglycemia, usually ingesting some form of sugar, but even one instance of hypoglycemia that is left untreated can cause permanent neurological damage. But each case has its own short and long-term effects. In 2011 alone, 20.9 million people were diagnosed with diabetes mellitus in the United States. This is a very, very high number, but it is for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. 5% of this number, or approximately 1,045,000, were diagnosed with type 1, which is a case that usually is called juvenile diabetes because it is diagnosed in those 35 years all the way up to being born with it. It's an autoimmune disease, so it's not something that can be prevented. It's when the body attacks itself, killing off the cells that create the insulin. Now, even though 20.9 million is an impressive number on its own, as the years have gone by, this number has increased every year as the number of cases of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes have been diagnosed. Even in just the last 20 to 30 years, it has climbed increasingly. Now, these are a few of the symptoms of hypoglycemia, and I'll touch a little bit more upon them in a minute, but first I'm going to show a short video on what it feels like to have these symptoms. Now, each case won't necessarily end in an extreme case, such as a coma or a seizure, but it is a high possibility. And one problem is that it doesn't have to be at 50 milligrams per deciliter or 70 or 20. It can happen at any time that the brain decides it doesn't have enough glucose to continue on. Now, a lot of these symptoms are both medical and psychological. You have the difficulty talking, the memory loss, confusion. A lot of those are like slurred speech. If a person saw someone having a hypoglycemic attack, they would believe that person was drunk because they are a lot of the same symptoms. Now, they also have, it messes with your moods because it's all messing with the frontal cortex. So it will cause the irritability. Sometimes some people will cry, again, making it look like they're drunk. But you also get anxiety because it completely wipes your body of all energy for the rest of the day. So you will have all kinds of anxiety that this is going to happen whenever you're trying to plan that special event, and it'll be a cause of worry for you, as well as the anxiety. Is this going to be the time that I'm going to pass out? Am I going to get this taken care of in time? And this is a drawing just to show how some of the symptoms can make the person feel that I was given to. Now this is a major issue because according to most doctors, they want a diabetic to stay in the best control possible that they can to make it as close to a non-diabetic as possible. A non-diabetic would have an HbA1c or average blood glucose over 3 to 4 months of less than 140, which that is at the highest end of the scale. They still prefer non-diabetics are usually 3.5 to 5.5. Now, having that good control of 6.5 to 7.0 means you're going to have a lot more lows in most cases to be able to keep that blood glucose average. But if you keep in a safer average of 155 to 184 milligrams per deciliter, or even 184 to 200, they consider you're in bad control and you need to manage it more, which is extremely difficult unless you're checking your blood glucose levels every 2 hours and giving insulin through shots or insulin pump treatment. Unfortunately, this is the biggest reason why doctors are so severe about it, is you have the other case of hyperglycemia, which is too much blood sugar. And the problem is the excess sugar will attach to the internal organs, causing kidney failure, heart problems, vision problems, and all kinds of other issues as well. One major problem, though, is that diabetics and non-diabetics are very different from one another. The non-diabetic is like that brand new car, whereas the diabetic is like the very first car ever made, the Model T 18 Ford. If both cars were going down the road at 50 miles per hour, the new car could stop on a dime with its brake system, but the older car couldn't, because diabetics, their bodies don't have that braking system. They don't know, they're the last ones to know when things are going to affect them, whether it be the weather or stress, hormones, anything like that can affect the blood glucose that a regular diabetic, a non-diabetic's body could account for and adjust quickly, whereas the diabetic has to try to deal with everything and calculate for food and everything else all at once. Now, there are long-term effects also to the hypoglycemia. Because it does cause problems with the brain each time, you have higher risk that's been correlated for Alzheimer's disease, a loss of brain cells due to small amounts of damage at each instance, and an increased risk of cardiovascular problems. And that last one is because of the fight or flight response. A lot of you have heard of it, and a lot of those symptoms are the fight or flight response. And it's because when the brain knows it needs more insulin, more sugar, it will release catecholamines through the adrenal gland to try to create more glucose. But those flight or flight responses also put a lot of stress on the body because it's not seeing that spider one time and not having it. When this is happening over and over again, that puts a lot of stress on the heart and the rest of the organs. And because it's under the sympathetic response system, it takes longer and longer each time you get the parasympathetic response to kick in again. So even if you know you've had more than enough glucose to bring that blood sugar up, sometimes the symptoms will persist much longer than the actual sugar going up. To conclude, diabetes itself is a very, very serious disease, and there are a lot of complications associated with the disease. And whether you have type 1 or type 2, it's not easy to manage, especially with day-to-day life. Type 1, especially with the autoimmune part of it. The brain requires glucose to run. Without it, it's going to shut down, especially the frontal cortex where most of the activity happens. Now, there are many different symptoms with the lows. Each person will discover different symptoms on their own, and even as they grow older, the symptoms can change. And the complications are something that the patient should be aware of, because it's not fun to know these kind of things, but to take care of one's own body is very important. And of course, we all want a cure for these kind of diseases, but at least until that point, like I learned at 5, it's much easier to learn these things ahead of time to be able to prevent them than it is to find out later that you already have something. I guess we'll have our questions at the end.